The following episode of Anchored in Education was previously recorded on Sunday, April 5th as a live episode. Welcome to Anchored in Education Live, Sunday, April 5th. I'm Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. But at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. All right, thank you for joining us this evening on the first Sunday in April of 2020. This is Anchored in Education, the live edition. It is Sunday, April 5th, and the current time is 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I am your host, Scott England, and last Sunday during Anchored Live, I reported that 7 states had closed their schools for the rest of the academic year. Now, it was incorrectly reported that Nebraska had made the decision to close for the rest of the academic year. The map I refer to daily was updated on Monday, showing that Nebraska has actually just strongly recommended they close. But adding to the closed for the rest of the academic year this week, which I confirmed independently, is Arizona, Indiana, Michigan, and Georgia. So out of these 10 states who have closed to in-person learning for the rest of the academic year, we now have over 9.1 million students who are on remote learning for the rest of the academic year, just those 10 states. And of course, we know that every other state is closed right now through at least some period of time. And Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker made the announcement last Tuesday that Illinois would remain homebound for remote learning now through April 30th. And so I saw a great tweet this week that said, you know what, the physical building may be closed, but the learning does not stop. And that is absolutely true. We are continuing on remote learning, and because of that, we are continuing the conversation on remote learning for Anchored in Education. So our focus this week, we're going to look at some of those specialist areas. We're going to be talking about art and PE tonight, and also tonight we have a special guest from higher education to talk about how she has had to shift her science courses to online with little notice. And of course, Anchored in Education wants to talk to educators tonight. You can tweet at me at eScottEngland or at eScottEngland on Twitter. You can use hashtag Anchored in Education, hashtag Anchored Live. You can email podcast at eScottEngland.com. We want to find out what is working for your classroom, your school, your district. Get a hold of us. Join the conversation. If you sign up to mixlr.com/anchored in education, hello to the listeners out there. You can join in on a chat going on there. And we'll definitely, if you got questions you want to put out on the chat, we'll keep monitoring that for you as well. Forgot last week, threw a late tweet out, but not going to do that this week. I've got my wife, Jennifer, on the controls. She's giving me a bad look right now, but it's okay. She is the one that's keeping us rolling here. She's getting our music playing and all of that, so big shout out to her. My guests tonight include Jodi England, a rural art teacher, Nixie Hnetkovsky, a science instructor in higher education, and Ben Landers, a PE teacher from South Carolina that you might better recognize as the PE specialist. Now, to get us started tonight, we're going to bring back a 2-time Anchored in Education guest to talk about planning for remote learning in art education. Of course, I'm talking about Jodi England, and yes, she is my sister, but I'll say again, that is not why she is an Anchored in Education guest. In fact, as my sister, she could probably tell you that being a family member doesn't give you an automatic guest opportunity on the podcast. No, Jodi is talking to us because she is a 20-year veteran art teacher, spending 13 years teaching high school students in Decatur Public Schools and the last 7 years in a rural setting in Argenta, Orienta. She also teaches for an organization based out of Decatur, Illinois called Our Voice Through Art, which is an organization that provides art experiences for teens and adults with special needs in her surrounding area. And the second time that she was a guest on the podcast, we actually talked about Our Voice Through Art. It was an awesome episode. You should definitely go back and check it out. The Our Voice Through Art, it too has been impacted by COVID-19. And so, you know what? Just grab a snack, sit tight, stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk to Jodi England. So this Anchored in Education live show is not typical, and it is fun, and I would love to do more, but I'd like for you to subscribe to Anchored in Education on whatever platform you get your podcasts. Every Monday, we have new episodes, and we have had amazing guests too. Our topics are endless. If it can even be remotely tied to education, we are going to talk about it. And we don't just talk to practicing educators, we often step outside of our profession to connect with those doing amazing things so then we can implement those ideas into our districts, our schools, and our classrooms. Because after all, we are all anchored in education. All right, we're back on Anchored in Education Live, and I am joined by my sister Jodi England, a middle school and high school art teacher in the rural district of Argenta, Orienta. Good evening, Jodi, and welcome to Anchored in Education Live.
Hello, Scott.
Hey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm trying to get your sound up here a little bit just to make sure that we're all good.
Okay.
All right. So, let's see. How has planning changed for you now that we have entered remote learning days? And what are some examples of, say, self-paced art activities that are fun, engaging, and creative in remote learning?
Well, I tell you what, Scott, I mean, this has really been quite a time for us all, you know. It's just not even realistic to even try to think about resuming my curriculum that I had planned for the rest of the semester. If I were in a classroom with students, we would be painting, working with clay, various don't have at home. So trying to wrap my head around what teaching art from home could entail has been quite a process these last few weeks. And I've really found myself flooded with so much information. I mean, so many teachers are sharing out there, which is incredible. I mean, so many ideas, so many videos. It's just been amazing. I filled up a whole notebook, Scott. I mean, I just was taking notes.
Wow.
Just like filling it up, like, so many great ideas. And then I sat back and looked at it and thought, okay, now what? I mean, I teach grades 6 through 12.
Yeah, so, that's a lot of grades to plan for there.
Right. And so it's like, well, okay, I have all these ideas I've jotted down, but what goes with what grade level? And anxiety really set in and, nearly paralyzed me. I was kind of just sat for just a couple of days thinking, like, what am I really going to do? And then I had self-doubt set in where I was thinking, will I be able to take these ideas from other teachers and videos and lessons and such and make them feel authentic for my style of teaching? And especially, since it's not in person.
Sure.
And it's just a whole different, method of interacting with my students and such. So, I want to be me. I want to be Miss England, and I want to be reaching my students. And it was really at that moment when I realized that I need to turn a page in that notebook, and I just needed to plan for what I know, which is my students. And so I just felt like it's not a time to dive into a whole bunch of new. I mean, though, and that notebook I have, that's full of resources. I'm still going to utilize that. I'm either now during remote teaching or in the future. it's just incredible how many teachers have shared. For me personally, I had to reel it back in and kind of just think like, now's not the time to try to reinvent a wheel for myself. I've been teaching for 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what I know as far as my curriculum and what I want to teach, but I also know my students. And I think that's really important for us right now to kind of think about who it is that's sitting at home, waiting to connect with us. And so what I'm doing with myself here, Scott, is I'm actually starting with what students already know. And so I'm not starting with any new material. I mean, trying to engage them first with what they already know, just to get accustomed to this new format.
Yeah.
And then gradually getting to know, some different types of material and techniques and things like that. I'm hoping to kind of, pull in these next few weeks, but it's just a whole new territory for all of us, and for a lot of students, I think they're stressed and they're unsure about what it is and how they're supposed to be learning and whatnot. So, So that's kind of the process I've taken with planning. I mean, it's just really been an interesting few weeks. It's kind of, I've come full circle and finally feel like, okay, I think I've got this now. But it was a process to get there for me.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that this is one of the first times, at least since I've been in education, you've been in longer, where you can't just you can't see what other districts have done in the past for past pandemics. I mean, we're going through this the first time together with everybody, and everybody's kind of in our same boat.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think that's something too that I realized, and I think I read it somewhere, someone said, don't try to compare yourself. And I think that's where it kind of hit me like, okay, because I felt like, oh, maybe I should be trying to do videos like this or like that. And then I realized like, gosh, everybody is kind of taking their own niche and like their comfort zone, and they're pulling it. Mine isn't really making a lot of videos and things like that. So I can utilize some of those resources that other teachers are putting out there, but trying to still kind of stay within my comfort zone a little bit, just so I'm not overwhelming myself to start with, is kind of my game plan. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no model for how to go about doing this.
No, but there is for next time. So save the notes and save the notebook.
Oh, for sure. I mean, so many great ideas. So, I mean, you mentioned like, what are some examples of some things, activities that are fun, engaging, creative for remote learning? And, a lot of my students have sent me pictures of chalk drawings that they've been doing with sidewalk chalk.
Yeah.
Outside. So, I mean, that's something that's really fun. If you have sidewalk chalk, I myself didn't have any, so I tried making my own.
Okay, how'd that go?
It was kind of it did not go well.
Okay, well.
It didn't. I think it would have been better as a sidewalk paint. Which I also saw some home recipes for that, just cornstarch and water. So if anybody's wanting to do that at home, it's pretty easy to do, but mine did not set up like chalk should have. But chalk drawings are fun, and just, drawing with any kind of material on any kind of paper, napkins, whatever you've got, newspapers. I think just giving prompts or using, asking students to use imagination with objects around their house or their pets or their family, photographing objects around the house. I know something that I'm having my students do. I'm going to have them go around their house and collect some objects that they can set together as in like a still life arrangement, and looking for different heights and different contrasting colors and whatnot, and have them arrange this and just take a photograph and then frame it in such that there's a good composition. That's something that is relying on their prior knowledge. That's something we did last semester in class. And so they're familiar with putting together a good, strong composition. They know what a still life is. And so just taking a photograph of that and then submitting that to me will be one of their assignments I'm giving them next week. So I'm just trying not to overwhelm my students overall. Sure. But now I can take that photo, and a few weeks down the road, we don't know what's to come here for the long haul for the month of May even. But if by chance, we still need to rely on remote learning beyond this first stretch here, we could always take those photos out and then end up making some art from those photos. Yeah. So that's something that people could do at home. I've given a photo scavenger hunt, and that is really fun, to make a list of things and have students go around their house or even outdoors on walks and look for different things and take photos. I created an I Spy, and this I got from another teacher. I'm sorry, I don't know who put this out there, but I saw this online and thought it was a great idea. You remember the old highlight magazines where they'd have the I Spy pages and you'd have to search? So the idea is you go around your house and you collect a whole bunch of items and you put it in an arrangement like on a table and then or on the floor, and then take a picture of it. And then you have a list of what you want people to try to search for.
Oh, that's fun.
That's been a really fun one. I had a lot of students. I put this out there too for students to try to do, and a lot of them had fun with that. And the weather's been great. It's supposed to be a good forecast here in my area in Central Illinois this next week. So it's going outside and collecting leaves and twigs and pine cones, things like that to make a design. You could use food to make fun things like that. And something we've done here at my house with my own kids with food is to do stamping. So if you have any kind of paint in your house, you can brush on paint onto various types of things, but we've used some food in our kitchen, like some celery, peppers, lemon. I know it may seem completely silly, but it's a fun way to do printmaking and stamping with different kinds of food things. And you can also do it with Lego. And that is really, really cool. You can do very cool designs with Legos too.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
You know what? There's so many ideas. Can I tell you, Scott?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that, I've talked to you twice before. And so I just have to repeat to you and to everybody, my mantra, art is for everyone. Yeah. And I don't think that, art can be creative in so many different ways. This doesn't have to be stressful, even though I first even myself got myself in a little bit of a bind with my thought process. Art can be created so many different ways with so many different kinds of materials. And so the most important thing is just to keep it simple and look around the house, see what you've got, and hey, how can we be creative? How can we make something out of this?
Yeah, it's everywhere. Art is everywhere.
It is.
I love the scavenger hunt. And I'm already thinking of how, because unfortunately, pretty much across the country, Easter egg hunts are canceled.
Yeah.
And I know that my kids are kind of bummed about that. And so being able to create a virtual scavenger hunt, kind of like a reverse egg hunt, that'd be kind of fun to do something like that.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
So, hey, you kind of talked a little bit about your students submitting things to you and everything, but assessment and grading. So that is not the major focus of remote learning, but providing thoughtful feedback and positive encouragement still is. So how are you providing feedback to your students during remote learning?
Well, I'm using Google Classroom, and I'm providing classrooms there. When students turn something into me, I'm able to give feedback in that way. And overall, starting out here, as I told you, I'm starting out my assignments really simplistic and just trying to get the engagement going. My feedback is very positive, very encouraging, and it's just a whole new way of learning and doing work for students, and I don't want to stress them out. So that's kind of my plan for the start. And then I'm gradually going to get into giving more tips and suggestions for taking their work further, giving more constructive criticism, and so on. So that's kind of how I'm, going about doing that. And I have to say, really, I'm glad that our focus isn't on grades.
Me too.
Yeah, I know. I knew that you would feel the same. It's just something that, I know we've talked about. It's just so needed, I think, in education as students wanting to learn for understanding.
Yes.
For the knowledge and for actually understanding the content and making connections and making those real world connections. And I feel like, Scott, this moment that we're having this could be a turning point in education. It really could be. It really could be. And I'm hopeful for those positive changes and just a different mindset of what learning and what education can be, because I think it's really needed, So I think that there could be some good that comes out of this when it's all over.
I hope so. I really,
Me too.
I think that there definitely will be, because there has just been some super neat ideas out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have seen educators who have sort of shied away from technology all this time, just not necessarily out of stubbornness, but out of more of apprehensiveness. And that has kind of been taken away. So now it's kind of like, okay, you've got to go into it and you don't have to go full on in. Kind of what you were saying, just get in and do what you're comfortable doing. And all of a sudden, they're doing amazing things. Teachers that never would have been on a video before, all of a sudden are putting out fun videos for kids.
Yes.
And they're doing it right here in my district. And my kids are getting to see it. And it's so great to see the teachers explore different ways. And I know that is exciting. And I hope
that is. I love that.
Yeah, it is. And I hope after the whole pandemic's over and we're back to, to what we know as normalcy, I hope a lot of this that we've utilized in remote learning continues, because we can definitely use this in face-to-face instruction as well.
Yeah.
So,
I agree, Scott. And I'm telling you, I actually am one of those who shied away from technology. And this has forced me into it. My 13-year-old son, my seventh grader, taught me how to use Google Classroom.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's, and it is, and I'm trying, different other different apps and programs and such too. Not fully utilizing them yet with my students, but I'm trying to figure it out for myself, because I'm thinking, hey, this might be a way that I could have students submit work, or to create like an online gallery or something like that. And it's like, wow, this is stuff that I've always thought of and I knew other teachers use, but I didn't take time to figure it out. I shied away from it. So for sure. Yeah. And I know, for just speaking for myself, I do plan to use all of this in the future. So I hope others do too. Yeah.
Hey, in the second episode we did together, we talked more about our voice through art, and I talked a little bit about that in the opening. For those just joining the conversation here, that's an organization that provides art classes to students and adults in your area who have special needs. But these classes cannot meet now either. And but I believe I saw in a post or something that parents are sending you pictures of the kids working on art at home. How has this response been?
Yeah, they are. And I didn't initiate that at all. One parent just posted her son's artwork on my Facebook page and said, he's missing you and missing making art, and posted one of his drawings. And then I think another parent saw that, and then she posted, and then I had a few text me pictures, and they're all creating. It's just been amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really great.
Before we let you go here, you'd kind of mentioned a little bit earlier you'd picked up something from another art teacher. Do you have any art teachers on Twitter or Pinterest or Instagram that we could give a shout out to and a follow during this remote learning time?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I mentioned before Cassie Stevens. I'll mention her again. She's an elementary teacher. But she has, even though I don't teach elementary, I still get a lot of ideas from her and a lot of creative things. And that's one thing with art. No matter what the lesson is, it can be adapted for various levels. So I definitely would recommend Cassie Stevens. And then if I can give a shout out to one of my own hometown art teachers here in Decatur, Mary Lanker. Mary teaches at Stephen Decatur Middle School here in Decatur. She's my son Colin's art teacher. I've known Mary for years, and she has been doing videos, and she's actually done 30 days of art. And hers, I believe it's Miss Lanker's art. Is where you can find Mary's page. And so she's posting a different lesson every day for 30 days. Wow. And she's also doing some art history clips and things. And I'm actually learning a lot through her. And so that's been really fun. So I would definitely check out those two.
Okay. And next week, our focus is going to be on parents and students. And you are a mother of 3 boys, all still in school for the final time, because you've got a senior. I do. A junior.
Sophomore.
Sophomore. Okay. Yep. Don't tell them I forgot that. And a 7th grader.
Yeah.
And so how has their adjustment been in remote learning?
It has been a little bit of a struggle because of routine. And, it's funny because it's like, you have kids that are like, oh, we have to get up again and we have to go through this again. When you're in the grind, it's just like, oh, man, we have to do this again. But now that that's been taken away, they're longing for that kind of routine and just a structure and a schedule. And that's been kind of a struggle for us here, is to try to get some kind of a routine and schedule down. But, their teachers have been great. The older boys with, their high school teachers, they've done some Google Meet, which is a video, type of meeting sort of thing, that they've done, where they've actually been able to see their teachers and see classmates and connect in that way. So that's been really good. So they're adjusting, we're getting there. We're getting there. I think this week, will be, I don't know. I feel like we're having a turning point for some reason. This week feels like we're all kind of getting into our groove. So.
Oh, good.
It'll be okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, Jodi, thanks again for joining us on
Scott.
Anchored in Education, the live show this time.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right. So I have talked and texted regularly with Jodi during these shutdown days, on what remote instruction would look like and for planning. And so I'm really thankful she could take a moment to chat with us tonight. And, she gave some shout outs of people, but I will give one to her to follow her on Twitter at J England Art, or on Instagram at jenglandart5. All right, in just a moment, we will have a conversation with Nixie Hnetkovsky, a science instructor at Frontier Community College, to find out how it has been in transitioning her higher ed courses to remote learning. We'll be back in just a second. Are you looking for a completely free resource to empower every voice in your classroom? You need to check out Flipgrid. Flipgrid is an easy way to engage and empower every voice in your classroom or at home by recording and sharing a short, awesome video with your students and then allowing them to respond doing the same. Flipgrid can be used for all learners, from pre-K to PhD and beyond. Join educators and learners across 180 countries as they experience the magic of student voice. Just recently, I joined a Flipgrid that a teacher in my district put out to her students. It was awesome. It's simple, fun, and takes only a few minutes. Try Flipgrid today. All right, we're back on Anchored in Education Live. Extremely appreciative of Flipgrid and the dedication that they have in providing tools for educators. So we've been talking remote learning for a few weeks, but several weeks ahead of K-12 education was many higher education institutions who made the decision to transition to remote learning after their spring breaks. One such institution was Frontier Community College. And so Nixie Hnetkovsky has been a science instructor for Frontier Community College for 17 years. And she long ago recognized the power of online learning, as she has taught some of her courses using an online or hybrid format. But I imagine it is completely different going from an all in person to an all online, and we're going to find out. Nixie, welcome to Anchored in Education Live.
Thank you, Scott. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, we are just thrilled that you could join us tonight. First time Anchored in Education guest. And
yes.
So, you teach science courses, including anatomy, biology, and microbiology. And
yes.
I know you previously had some experience teaching these online, but how different is it to transition a face-to-face class to online instruction mid-year?
Honestly, when I first started, I thought, this will take me a little time, but I've got so much of, all my content out there for my fully online classes, and it's really been a transition that took a little longer than what I expected, mostly because, really for two reasons. First of all, the students in my online courses have a lab kit in their homes, and so they sit at their kitchen table and perform all the labs necessary for the course. In this case, they don't have anything, and so we are 100% relying on tools online. If we're supposed to dissect a heart, then I've plugged in a video for them to watch where someone dissects a heart. They're looking for particular structures, but it's really been a transition that has taken a little bit of time.
Okay.
A little bit of time, yeah. And two, I think another one of the transitions is that these students are accustomed to hearing instructions instead of just reading. And we all know that there's different styles of learning. And so some people are more apt to need that audio instruction. And so making those tutorials, making those videos where I actually vocalize those instructions has taken time. So,
Okay. Now, you talked about this a little bit, but I'm not sure. I think almost most, at least if not all, of the classes you teach do involve labs, and
yes.
so this is a key component of your courses. How do you make sure students can complete their labs and meet the course learning objectives in remote learning?
I make sure that I keep an eye on those outcomes. And what's really wonderful is higher education. And I know we're probably a little bit behind K-12 in working with assessments and outcomes and really tracking activities and correlating them with outcomes. And so I just, I make sure that what is in the outcome is what I'm covering. Many of our textbooks and course websites tie those outcomes in as well. And I try to test them in the quizzes. Some of them are practice quizzes. Some of them might just be quizzes from worksheets that they've had to complete in doing the labs and the lecture content. And that helps me keep an eye out on whether or not they understand the content and if they are fulfilling those particular outcomes. It's tricky, but it's I don't know. For me, it's a lot of fun because I get to tie in a lot of different activities.
Yeah.
And really, try to, speak to all those learning styles while I'm trying to cover those outcomes.
Sure. Now, you sound, as I talk to you, you sound like, you've got kind of a good grasp on how it's going, and you seem pretty calm. But how's your students through all of this? I mean, have any of them been stressed in this transition?
Oh yes, and I would say that I'm talking a good talk right now. It is very stressful. It just depends on the time of day, but the students have adjusted very well. The first week was a little touchy, and just again these fully face-to-face classes and those students, it was an adjustment that. On one hand, I almost think it's good for them to see that, you do need to be responsible. Yes, I am telling you what to do in class, but you also have to be responsible even more so now. So I get lots of emails all times of day and night, but to be honest with you, I've had very few that just literally could not deal with it. Everybody's turning things in. All the instructors across the board, and I'm sure this applies to any institution, we're making sure to keep a very close eye on students who are not participating and trying to reach out, to help them find whatever they're needing and accomplish it. So,
all right. So in addition to teaching, you are also the head volleyball coach for the Frontier Bobcats.
Yes.
How does the closure impact recruiting and spring exhibitions? Because you were in the middle of practicing
Right.
in preparation for this upcoming season in August.
Yes. It really was just a big downer. Spring exhibition is exactly that. It's just exhibition, doesn't count towards our record or anything moving forward in NJCAA. But it really just brought a close to our year together very abruptly. And that's one thing that many of the players have had a hard time dealing with is all of a sudden everything's just over. And, a lot of the players didn't have time to say goodbye to one another before they went their separate directions. We've got girls coming from a lot of different places. And so in that respect, it just was cut down on the time that we got to spend together and really close out the year together. As far as recruitment goes, it really hasn't changed anything. I had most of my campus visits with recruits early on, a lot of them in the fall and early spring semester. So the rest of this I'm doing online, which I do year round. So recruiting is going well. It would be nice to to be able to have more students, more recruits come to campus, but it's going just fine.
Okay. And now, has there been talks of the opening season being delayed?
Right now, there haven't been any talks about that. And for myself, I haven't really talked to my players about this, but I think we can only get prepared for that just from the way they're talking right now with, some of these social distancing, shelter in place mandates, extending through the summer. So I think it's something I'm definitely preparing for it, but I hope that it won't delay it.
Okay.
So,
well, in addition to you teaching in higher ed and you coaching higher ed, you are a mother of a senior in high school.
yes.
So how is she handling the abrupt end so far to her year?
She's dealing with it well on most days. Her teachers have really done a good job putting content online, and they actually switched to using Chromebooks this year, and so they were in a very good place for everybody to get home. The only thing would depend on the family having Wi-Fi, internet access at home, but she's done well. I think they've provided enough work that it's keeping her busy, which is good, because the less time she has to think about things she's missing,
right,
that seems to help. But she's, there's so many things as being a senior that they're missing out on. Those days they are just a little more carefree than what they're being able to experience now. And all those big events, dinner theater,
yes.
and nothing's really been talked about in terms of graduation. But I think everybody's kind of got that gray cloud that they feel like is following them, that there's going to be changes, of course. So
sure. Well, and commencement for Frontier has been I guess canceled. You can walk in December, is that correct?
Honestly, I have not heard.
Well, maybe I made that up, but we ought to probably take that back. I just assumed, I guess.
Well, I think there's a very good likelihood that that's going to be the case, but I personally have not seen anything on that. But you could be right, Scott. But I know that it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
Right.
So.
Well, Nixie, I thank you for taking the time to talk a little bit more. You are our first live higher ed guest that we've had.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much.
Well, we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Nixie is an innovative instructor. She recognizes the power of digital learning, and she's an advocate for what is best for our post-secondary students. So a big shout out again to her for joining us for the first time on Anchored in Education. Now, we'll be right back to have a conversation with the PE specialist and 2019 South Carolina Elementary PE Teacher of the Year, Ben Landers. Next week on Anchored in Education Live, we are going to talk to parents and students because remote learning is going on throughout our country right now, and it is important to see how it is going from other perspectives. So, do you know of a parent or a student who would make a great guest? Send me an email to podcast@escottengland.com or tweet to me using @escottengland or #Anchored in Education, or even #Anchored Live. We want to hear what is working and what is not. Some of the best suggestions for teaching I have received over the time has come from those outside perspectives. So that's what's next week on Anchored in Education Live. All right, a few years ago, I was talking to a PE teacher about an amazing strategy they had to resolve conflicts between students. I asked her how she came up with this, and she answered, without hesitation, the PE specialist. I think it was that same day I began following Ben Landers, the PE specialist, on Twitter. I'm excited he was able to find time to join us tonight. Ben, welcome to Anchored in Education Live.
What's up? Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Hey, we're super excited to have you as well. Tonight we're talking remote planning in some of those the specialist areas, and physical education is definitely one of those. And honestly, I mean, physical education, so it's important at all times. Let's get that out there right now. But I believe we need to be putting an emphasis on how important physical activity is during a shutdown. So do you fear that more students will become inactive now that students are closed and there's sports not going on?
I think it just really depends on the situation. Like, I know if you're living in New York and you're in an apartment and you have no space, don't have anywhere to go outside and play, you don't have a backyard, it's going to be a lot tougher for those families and kids. And then also, depending on if both your parents are working and there's nobody to hold you accountable. But like in my situation, my kids have been more active because we have more time to be active, So at least in our situation in South Carolina, I think a lot of kids at the most get recess like 20 minutes a day and then PE once a week. So I hope most of the kids are getting more than that while they're at home.
Yeah.
That's like what I've encouraged my kids to do through videos and stuff like that. And I think one important thing to note is that there's a big difference between PE and physical activity. So
okay,
it's going to be tough for people to substitute PE at home, but I think people can still get more physical activity than they normally would at school. So,
okay.
But I don't know. We'll see.
And so in South Carolina, what is the current status of school closure right now?
We are under the governor has closed schools through April. So they haven't said what's going to happen after April.
Okay, but at least through April 30th.
Definitely through April 30th, yeah.
Okay, so how does planning change when learning becomes remote? What is the primary focus for getting students up and moving to be active during mandated closures?
Yeah, so the strategy I took was, and kind of what we were instructed to do from our admin was, as related areas, was they have a take-home packet. So obviously you hope that everybody has online access, but we have to have options for people that don't. So we had I had some different exercise and workout options lined up. And then luckily, because I have the website, I had a lot of content already on YouTube. So I was able to design some lessons around that stuff that I had already had up there and give some instructions. But the main limiting thing is the equipment. Like, a lot of kids don't have a jump rope, or they might not have a ball. And so the kind of things that you do in phys ed, other than just the general exercise stuff, which is kind of what's flooding the internet right now, is like all the exercise stuff. But what kids are going to be missing out on is the fundamental movement skills, like throwing and catching a ball, a frisbee, kicking, bouncing, jump rope, gymnastics, like that kind of stuff, which is tough to do if you don't have the right equipment. So I basically gave my kids a lot of options in all the things that we've covered throughout the years that they've been in my school. And I'm hoping that the kids will at least have like one or two of those items that they can review and work on.
Right.
So
now, you are an elementary PE teacher. What grades do you have?
I teach 4K through 5th grade.
Okay.
I teach the whole school, so we see everybody once a week.
Okay. And does your planning change based on grade levels for the 4th grade or 4K versus the 5th grade? Oh
yeah, for sure. You're starting with very basic stuff with 4K, and then getting more advanced and getting into gameplay. 4K kindergarten and 1st grade, you're basically a lot of those kids have never even bounced a ball before, so you're starting from scratch, and you're just trying to get them good enough to be able to do those basic skills in a way that they could play a very modified game in like 2nd through 5th grade. That's at least the way that I run it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ben, a challenge that I run into as a parent is finding ways to motivate my children to be active. And what kind of advice would you provide to help parents, maybe even other educators, motivate their children or students?
Yeah, that's definitely a struggle, I think, for a lot of parents, and for me too. I've got 3 kids, but the main one I'm thinking of is my 6-year-old daughter. She's in kindergarten. She's the oldest one, so
okay.
I haven't jumped into phys ed with my 5-month-old, and not too much with my 2-year-old yet, although he's into it.
Yeah.
But I think earlier on, especially like in those early years, there's a lot more extrinsic motivation. Like, I think it's fine to say, hey, when we get back, we're going to have a healthy popsicle after this bike ride, or, like the kind of things that you can do to motivate kids to make it a fun experience. And then hopefully through that experience, you're going to build some intrinsic motivation. Like for my daughter, this year we got her into some 1 mile fun runs in our city. And I was like, hey, if you do this fun run, we're going to work on it together. We're going to practice, and I'm going to get you some brand new racing shorts for the race day, you know? And it's like the kind of thing we would have gotten anyway, but then framing it in a way that, that makes her feel like she earned something. And then during the race, she got to experience this really cool experience of finishing, getting a medal. And so I'm hoping that, you know, as she gets older, some of that will become intrinsic. Another thing we do is that the kids know, like after I go to the gym or go for a run, that I get a glass of Gatorade. And our rule is that you can't have Gatorade unless you did exercise, because the whole point is to like replenish your body.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
That's one of the rewards that we have too. Just thinking of, you know, I'm not saying you should give your kid a candy bar if they go throw the ball for 10 minutes, but trying to think of things that you can do to make the experience more fun. And then also, I think letting your kids experience as many different things as they can, because I would love for my daughter to be into like surfing and rock climbing and skateboarding, because that's what I like to do. But she's really more into dancing and music and ballet, you know, and that's okay. And I have to foster the things that she's into and try to find out what she's passionate about. So I think as parents, it's our job to kind of figure out how our kids are built and then try to support them in the best way we can to build those natural talents and interests that they have.
Okay. And I do want to clarify for the listeners out there that Ben said you can't motivate your students with a candy bar, but we absolutely can motivate ourselves.
For sure. Whatever you need to do.
But an interesting, you had mentioned twice during that last bit there, you mentioned a healthy popsicle or Gatorade, only if you have exercise. So this is another thing, now that we're on remote learning with the health aspect and eating right and timely and everything. So is that something that you're incorporating, at least for info for your parents?
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't incorporated that. I did a healthy tips video last week, and I talked about the emotional and mental side of it as well as the physical stuff. So we talked about calling the people that you love, like maybe your grandparents if you haven't talked to them in a long time, and catching up with them and taking, you know, breaks and being mindful, as well as getting active and doing all the stuff you would expect a phys ed teacher to talk about. But I didn't even mention the healthy food stuff, but that's a good point. So maybe I'll put that in my next my next send home packet.
Well, I just think that again, this is just, you know, looking off my own kids, is that now they have a routine access to, you know, a snack cabinet, whether it be a sweet treat or chips or something. And, you know, it's something I never had really thought about until I heard you mention something about healthy. So maybe we can now all focus on that.
For sure. Yeah. I think one thing too is to think about the fact that kids watch what you do a lot more than they listen to what you say.
Yeah.
So if you're being an active example to your kids, they have a higher chance and a better example to follow in your footsteps. But if you're saying eat healthy snacks and then you're getting the candy bars, you're telling them to get the carrots, it's like, wait a minute, we know what's going on here. Like kids can figure that out real quick. So all
right, well, I guess I've been called out on mine, so I'll go back to the healthy snacks too.
I'm preaching to myself as well, so we all struggle.
Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today on Anchored in Education Live.
For sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Good to talk to you.
Yep. All right, so follow Ben on Twitter today at the PE Specialist. You know, when Anchored in Education returns to regular programming, I'm going to see if Ben can join us for an extended conversation on physical education. But in the meantime, check out his Twitter and his website, thepespecialist.com. Both Ben and his website are great resources for all of us. So I want to thank everyone who joined us on Anchored in Education Live again tonight. The live show and even the podcast really are not possible without listeners. So thank you all to those who joined us to listen tonight. And I'm always looking for ways to improve. So hit me up with ideas. podcast@escottengland.com. I also want to thank my wife, Jennifer, again. She takes over my Twitter account, plays the commercials, and all around keeps me on track for these live shows. Remote learning is like nothing we have seen before. Sure, there are bits and pieces we have used before. I get that. Flipgrid was used long before COVID-19, as was Zoom. But now we are utilizing resources such as these in a completely different way. We are adding new approaches and new strategies to effectively teach in a remote learning format. I think my favorite part of the whole thing is that we have de-emphasized the compliance portion of grading and have taken a much more comprehensive approach in offering additional guidance and feedback which strengthens learning. I believe we are finding ways to become stronger educators. I have seen educators from teachers to principals to superintendents step up to this remote learning challenge. I've seen some who haven't varied their instruction now become re-energized with this challenge of teaching. And most importantly, though, I've seen educators lift each other up, support each other. My Illinois School for Advanced Leadership Cohort 5 met via Zoom this past Thursday. It is amazing seeing so many people come together in one large, cohesive support system, spread out from the northern part of Illinois all the way to my beautiful southern Illinois, and the same thing is happening nationwide. Keep doing the amazing things you are doing. And remember, at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education.